Kris sat by the window in the living room, gazing outside, letting her soul drift into the quiet space of the house. A peaceful day after so many storms. A gentle rain was falling outside, creating a tender and tranquil atmosphere. Suddenly, the sound of the doorbell rang, startling her. As she walked toward the door, Kris noticed a white envelope placed on the doorstep. She bent down to pick it up, sensing the weight of every word inside without needing to open it just yet. It was a sign she had been waiting for, yet one she had never truly wanted. The letter was from Travis, her daughter Kylie's husband, a man she had once considered a son. Family relationships always carry their own complexities. Though she tried not to dwell on past conflicts, the memory of Kylie in her wedding dress, along with the coldness and even the cutting remarks from her son-in-law on her daughter's big day, still made Kris's heart ache. It was a wound she had never been able to heal. Kris sat down on the fabric-covered chair in the living room and slowly opened the letter, each line emerging faintly in the dim afternoon light. A mix of anxiety and anticipation stirred within her. As she read each word, Kris could feel the sincerity behind Travis's message. He admitted to his mistakes and to not appreciating her contribution to Kylie's wedding. "I know I hurt you. You deserved more respect. What you did for Kylie and this family can't be measured in words," the letter said. The apology didn't surprise Kris, but it awakened something she had long tried to suppress. The pain from what had happened could not be easily forgotten, yet Travis's letter offered something like acknowledgement and restoration. These were not the words she had expected from him, but as she read them, she felt a sense of relief. For the first time in many months, she felt seen. Her role in Kylie's wedding, in this family, hadn't been meaningless. Travis didn't just apologize for his wrongdoings at the wedding. He also expressed genuine gratitude for the love and support Kris had given Kylie over the years. "Kylie is an amazing woman because of you, because of what you taught her. I now realize I never appreciated that. I truly regret it," he continued. Kris placed the letter on the table and looked at an old photo of Kylie, her only daughter, the one she had poured all her love and effort into raising and protecting. The image of little Kylie, with her innocent eyes and bright smile, always warmed Kris's heart. But now, after her daughter's stormy marriage, Kris felt a quiet distance between them. Kylie's marriage was not what she had hoped for, but it wasn't something she could control. She had witnessed her daughter's struggles over the years, and knowing that Travis had finally acknowledged his faults gave her some comfort. Still, the pain she had endured remained, and it wouldn't be easy to move past. Even so, Kris understood that Travis's acknowledgement and apology were an important step. It wasn't just about making amends for a wedding day. It was about recognizing her vital role in Kylie's life. Though words alone couldn't erase the pain, they served as a reminder that what she had done for her daughter had meaning. She stood up and walked to the window, gazing out into the rain. A sense of peace spread through her, a feeling she hadn't experienced in a long time. Travis's apology couldn't change the past, but at the very least, it reminded Kris that she hadn't been forgotten. Her sacrifices hadn't been in vain. Kris took a deep breath, feeling that part of her pain had been healed. It had been a long, difficult process, but she had made it through. In that moment, she realized she needed to start living for herself. She could no longer stand in the background of Kylie's or Travis's story. It was time to rediscover who she was, to move forward with strength and independence. With that thought, Kris placed the letter back on the table, feeling as though she had begun a new chapter in her life. A chapter in which she was not just Kylie's mother, but Kris, an independent, strong woman ready to face whatever lay ahead. Kris Jenner had devoted her entire life to nurturing her family, raising her children, and being the steady foundation behind her daughter Kylie's career. For years, she had quietly stood behind the successes of her family, never once thinking to take time for herself or seek recognition from anyone. But after Kylie's wedding, she experienced something entirely different: acknowledgement and honor from the community. Kris could hardly believe it when one morning, she received an envelope stamped with an official red seal from the community center. Inside was an invitation to a special appreciation event. dedicated to individuals who had made quiet but significant contributions to the community. The letter was written with formality and respect, highlighting her long-standing efforts in supporting the center, not only financially, but also with her time and dedication. Her contributions had helped many people in need, especially women in the community, though Kris had never imagined she would be recognized for it. She sat down, reading the letter over and over, as a warmth spread through her chest. For the first time, she wasn't just Kylie's mom, or the person in the background of the family story. Kris felt like an individual in her own right, someone with unique value. Her sacrifices and efforts had finally been acknowledged, and it was a feeling she had never dared to imagine. This wasn't just a simple appreciation event. It was the recognition and respect she had long waited for. Kris decided to attend the event, even though she wasn't sure how she would feel standing in front of others' eyes. She chose a simple yet elegant dress, appropriate for the occasion, and prepared for a night that she sensed would change her life. When she arrived, she was greeted by a warm and welcoming atmosphere. The women in the community, the very ones she had supported, were waiting for her with kind smiles. She felt a deep connection with them because no matter who Kris was, she had been a part of their lives, a small but meaningful part, just as she had always been for her family. But this time, no one mentioned Kylie or the famous daughter. Everyone saw Kris as an individual, a woman of her own worth. One by one, attendees shared stories of how she had positively impacted their lives. Each account was filled with gratitude and heartfelt appreciation. Kris felt a surge of emotions rising within her, touched and proud all at once. She hadn't realized she could change lives in such a way. When Kris was invited to the stage to receive a special award, a small trophy engraved with the words, "A woman who is cherished," she couldn't hold back her feelings. She stood, looked out at the crowd, and found herself unable to fully express what she felt in words. "I honestly don't know what to say," Kris began, her voice thick with emotion. "All I've ever done was try to do what's right, for my family, for my community, and I never thought I needed recognition for it. But today, seeing all of you here, I feel a warmth and love that I never went looking for. Thank you for seeing me, not just as a mother, but as an individual. That's the most precious gift I could ever receive." Silence filled the room for a moment before waves of applause echoed through the hall. Kris saw the respect in the eyes of those around her. For the first time, she felt truly present, not because she was the mother of someone famous, but because of the contributions she herself had made. That night, as she returned home, Kris felt alive in a way she hadn't in years. She was no longer someone's shadow. A sense of freedom and strength radiated through her body. She knew now that she hadn't just helped others. She had also helped herself by affirming her own value in this world. She realized she had finally been seen, not only for her role as a mother, but for her strength and courage as a woman. For the first time, Kris Jenner felt like herself, and that, above all, was what truly mattered. The story of Kylie and Travis's wedding became one of the most talked about events across social media. However, a small detail from the ceremony unexpectedly placed Kris Jenner, the bride's mother, at the center of a heated debate. What was supposed to be a joyful and celebratory day for her daughter turned into a painful experience for Kris, as she felt mistreated and disrespected by both Kylie and her son-in-law. It all began during the wedding preparations, when Kris chose to wear a graceful green dress. Though the gown was elegant and tasteful, Kylie and Travis not only failed to appreciate it, but also reacted with coldness, even disdain. Kris tried to remain composed, but the sting of rejection and exclusion lingered. She was just a mother, one who had devoted her life to her children, yet she found herself unacknowledged and disregarded by those she had sacrificed so much for. These actions unfolded in front of wedding guests, intensifying Kris's feelings of helplessness and isolation. The unconditional love she had always shown her daughter now seemed underappreciated, even invisible. The public humiliation was something Kris had never imagined would take place on what should have been one of the happiest days of Kylie's life. Not long after the wedding, an anonymous blog post surfaced online. The post recounted the incident in detail, especially highlighting how Kris had been criticized over the green dress. It quickly gained traction, spreading like wildfire across social media platforms. What started as a minor moment at a wedding evolved into a symbol. The green dress became an emblem of the disregard and ingratitude mothers often face. Public discourse began shifting, focusing not on Kris's appearance, but on the injustice she had endured. Instead of judgment, people expressed outrage toward Kylie and Travis for their lack of respect and appreciation. An overwhelming wave of empathy surged for Kris, especially among women who felt a deep resonance with her experience. Her story became a metaphor for the silent struggles and emotional labor that countless mothers and women endure without recognition. Support for Kris transcended her immediate circle of family and friends. Many women, particularly older mothers, began sharing their own stories of being overlooked or disrespected by their families. Kris's experience became a rallying cry, a representation of the quiet suffering and strength of mothers everywhere. The message was clear. In a modern society, a mother should be honored and cherished, not pushed aside or treated as invisible. Discussion exploded across online forums. From Facebook to Twitter, community groups to personal blogs, strangers who had never met Kris offered heartfelt support, and many began calling the incident the Green Dress Wedding War. It was no longer just a family issue. It became a national conversation about familial relationships, the dynamics between mothers and daughters, and how society values women within the home. The silent wave of justice that followed Kris's story didn't just critique Kylie and Travis. It served as a wake-up call to everyone who had ever taken a mother's sacrifices for granted. Her story reminded people that a mother's love and dedication are not things to be dismissed or forgotten. Beyond emotional support, the public began calling for a shift in how women, particularly mothers, are treated within families. The green dress story became a symbol of injustice and a plea for a world where respect and fairness within the family unit are paramount. Though Kris never sought fame from this story, she inadvertently became a symbol of strength for women everywhere, women who endure hardship and still stand tall. She is not just Kylie's mother. She is a woman in her own right, deserving of love and respect. Her story changed the way the community views motherhood and helped spark a broader shift in how society values women, not only for their familial roles, but for their independence and inner strength. The story of the green dress became one of the year's biggest cultural moments. And even though Kris never asked for recognition, she ultimately received everything she truly deserved. After a long period of tension between Kris and Kylie, their first reunion took place in a space filled with anticipation and deep emotions. Kylie, after all the conflicts and hurt, finally decided to return and face her mother. In her hands was a small box containing homemade scones, a simple treat, yet filled with sincerity and an earnest attempt to make amends. The scones were more than just a small gift. They symbolized apology, gentleness, and a first step toward healing the broken relationship between mother and daughter. Kylie had thought long and hard before making this decision. She knew her mother had been grappling with many negative emotions, and this was the moment to take responsibility. Not just to apologize, but to prove that she could be a more responsible daughter, one who was ready to face her mistakes and make things right. When Kris saw Kylie standing at the door with the scones, she felt a shift in her daughter. The anger and pain from the past still lingered, but there was something in Kylie's eyes that made her realize she couldn't turn away forever. However, Kris wasn't easily forgiving, nor did she rush to open her heart. She had endured too much pain to simply forgive without thinking carefully. Kylie sat down beside Kris, gently opening the box of scones and cutting a small piece to offer her mother. "Mom, I know I was wrong," Kylie began, her voice gentle but sincere. "I never meant to hurt you. I didn't understand that your sacrifices and dedication weren't things that could be easily overlooked." Her words seemed to open a path to healing. Kylie looked at her mother with a gaze full of remorse and a desire to change. What she said wasn't just an apology, but an acknowledgement of past mistakes and unspoken emotions. Kris sat in silence, listening to each word. Her feelings were hard to describe. For so long, she had always been the one standing behind, silently protecting the family. But now she needed to feel loved and respected as well. Kris couldn't ignore the deep wounds her daughter had caused, but she couldn't help but sense the sincerity in Kylie's apology. Facing her daughter, she felt a change in herself. Kris was no longer the person who would simply accept everything without saying anything. She was no longer silent and enduring. Kris slowly spoke. "Kylie, I can't deny that I've been heartbroken. I've always loved you, but not everything can be forgiven easily. I've given so much for you, but I also need respect. Our relationship needs to have respect and boundaries, something I haven't had for a long time." She spoke calmly but firmly, with no trace of weakness or indulgence. Kylie listened, her eyes beginning to well up, but she didn't interrupt her mother. Her mother's words were a wake-up call, reminding her that a mother isn't always the one who bears all the pain unconditionally. She realized that, over the years, she had focused too much on herself and forgotten that her mother also needed respect and love. Kylie didn't want her mother to endure silence, didn't want her to swallow her emotions to protect the family. "I understand, Mom," Kylie said, her voice weak. "I know I was wrong, and I want to change. I want us to start over to build a better relationship based on respect and love." Her words were a display of her sincerity and determination, but she also knew she couldn't ask her mother to forget everything that had happened. Kris nodded, not because she immediately agreed, but because she realized that the first step in rebuilding their relationship had to be mutual acknowledgement. She was no longer the submissive mother, the one who always yielded. Kris wanted to see real change in her daughter, and that could only come from mutual respect. She continued, "Kylie, I don't need you to be perfect, but you need to understand that I need respect, and our relationship has to be one of equality without anyone dominating the other. That's the most important thing." These words affirmed Kris's right as a mother, a right not to accept disrespect any longer. Finally, Kris and Kylie sat together, no longer mother and daughter in a dependent relationship, but as two women, each with their own independence and dignity. That conversation, while not healing all the wounds, opened up a new opportunity for both of them. An opportunity for them to understand each other more, to rebuild a relationship based on sincerity and respect. And although the road ahead was still long, this meeting marked a crucial turning point, the beginning of a new chapter in their relationship. After months of pain and sorrow, Kris decided that it was time for a change. Not just a change in her mindset, but also in her living space. The house, where she had spent so many melancholic moments, a place filled with memories of a marriage that had ended and the wounds from her daughter, had become a haunting space. Every corner of the house reminded Kris of memories she wanted to forget, especially the old wedding photos she had hung up for years as a reminder of the past. One morning, Kris decided to remove those photos. It wasn't that she wanted to forget the memories, but she needed to free herself from the emotional burden they carried. She carefully placed the photos in a box and stored them away, not to throw them away completely, but so she wouldn't have to face the past every day. Kris needed a new space, one not haunted by painful memories, so she could start fresh and look forward. At the same time, she decided to hang up the blue dress she once wore to a party. This dress was not just an ordinary piece of clothing. It symbolized rebirth and self-empowerment. The blue dress was tied to memories of freedom, a time when she never had to endure control or abuse. During the difficult years, that dress had been a part of Kris, helping her reconnect with herself, helping her find her own identity. Kris was not only changing her living space, but also how she viewed herself. Every little detail in the house now had its own meaning. Each item was a symbol of rebirth. She began redecorating the room with bright colors, items that brought a sense of lightness and tranquility. The house was no longer a place filled with sad memories, but a space of freedom and strength. She also began taking better care of herself. Kris attended yoga classes, exercised, and paid attention to her diet. Every day, she made time for herself, not to meet anyone's expectations, but to care for her own health and well-being. These changes not only brought physical benefits, but also helped her regain confidence and a sense of security in her own life. The changes in Kris's living space also reflected a shift in her emotions and mindset. Kris was no longer the mother who only knew how to sacrifice for her children. Nor was she the woman crushed by the past. She had become an independent, strong, and self-sufficient woman. The house was now a reflection of Kris's renewal and resilience. Every corner of the house contained freedom and hope for a bright future. What was remarkable was that after these changes, Kris received recognition from the community. A ceremony of appreciation was held by the community center, where she had quietly contributed for many years, honoring her. The people in the community saw her not just as the person behind a famous family, but as an individual of distinct value. Kris's efforts in helping those around her were acknowledged, and she felt that she had been truly recognized for her worth. Kris never expected that, after all the pain and loss, she would receive such respect and love from the community. That appreciation ceremony was a significant milestone in her life, not only because of the recognition from others, but because she had realized her own value. Kris understood that, no matter how difficult it may be, she could stand firm and continue to contribute to society. She didn't need to be the perfect mother, the perfect wife, or part of a famous family to be loved. She could be herself, and that was enough. Kris felt proud of what she had achieved. The feeling of being valued and honored was not just a mental encouragement, but also an affirmation of her independence and self-sufficiency. The people in the community saw her as a strong woman, someone who could overcome hardships and rise from failures. This recognition not only brought Kris joy, but also made her more confident in her future decisions. With each passing day, Kris felt a new strength within herself. The changes in her living space, in how she faced life, and in how she was recognized had renewed all her emotions. Kris had been reborn, not thanks to others, but thanks to her own resilience and determination. When Kylie entered her mother's house, there was no longer the tension or pressure that had existed before. Everything now felt gentle and peaceful. In the past, the meetings between mother and daughter were always filled with mixed emotions, heavy silences, impatient words, and sometimes disappointed glances. But today, everything had changed. Kylie was no longer the young, ambitious girl who focused only on herself and her career. She had become a daughter who wanted to restore the broken family bond. Kylie no longer looked at her mother through the lens of anger or unrealistic expectations. She had realized that, over the years, she had overlooked Kris's sacrifices and had acted thoughtlessly toward her. The expensive gifts, the apologies over the phone, or the promises never fulfilled could not replace the understanding and love that Kris truly deserved. And this time, Kylie knew that to heal their relationship, she had to do something different. Small, sincere actions without pressure. One of Kylie's first visits was on a rainy afternoon when she showed up unannounced with a basket of scones, a treat her mother had always loved. It was a simple gesture, but one that carried great significance. Kris was surprised to see Kylie standing at the door with a gentle smile, holding a basket of freshly baked scones. There was no anger, no coldness, only silent love. Kylie sat down beside her mother, helped her brew tea, and together they enjoyed the scones in a warm atmosphere. There was no rush, no tension, just peaceful moments they had both longed for. Kris sensed a change in Kylie's attitude. Her daughter was no longer the one to criticize or complain about her. Instead, Kylie began asking about Kris's life, about what she had been doing in recent days. She didn't just listen, she showed real concern. In the following visits, Kylie made an effort to change her old habits. Instead of just dropping by unprepared, Kylie took time to plan her visits. She began bringing small gifts for her mother, simple yet sincere inquiries. These gifts weren't expensive or lavish, but modest things like a book or a wool scarf that Kris had admired in a store. These were heartfelt gifts, given without expectations or calculations. Not only did Kylie bring gifts, but she also started paying attention to her mother's basic needs. She helped Kris rearrange things around the house, tidied the garden, and cared for the plants. These tasks might not seem like grand gestures, but for Kris, they were incredibly meaningful. Kylie no longer saw her mother as someone to rely on, but as a person with her own needs and desires, deserving of care and respect. Through each visit, the healing between mother and daughter became more evident. The conversations no longer revolved solely around family issues or past conflicts. Instead, they began sharing small things about life. stories about friends, favorite movies, plans for the future. This made Kris feel less alone in her life, and more importantly, she felt the love Kylie had for her. Kylie began to understand that not everything could be fixed overnight. She knew that their relationship had endured too much hurt and disappointment, but she also realized that every gentle visit, every small act of kindness, was an important step in healing those wounds. Kris didn't ask for anything grand. She just needed Kylie to be there, sharing peaceful moments without pressure. While their relationship couldn't be restored instantly, the changes in the way they treated each other, in their attitudes and feelings, had begun to open up a new path. Kris began to feel that her daughter truly cared for her, that she was no longer the young girl only living for herself, but an adult who valued family and her mother. Kris also realized that she didn't need to wait for grand apologies or dramatic gestures. Small, sincere actions were enough. The relationship between Kris and Kylie, though still facing many challenges, had begun to show positive signs. They were rebuilding a solid foundation of understanding and love, a foundation built not on promises or expensive gifts, but on simple yet meaningful actions. After years of being caught in the whirlwind of family life and sacrificing for those around her, Kris finally realized that she had spent too much time giving to others and had neglected herself. No longer the selfless mother who gave everything for her children, no longer the one behind Kylie's successes, Kris began to find a way to live for herself. She signed up for a sewing class. Before, Kris had never had time for personal hobbies. Instead of spending her free time on relationships or her children's work, she now chose to create a space for herself to grow and learn. The sewing class was the first step for Kris to reconnect with the joy of creative activities. The stitches, the dresses she sewed by hand, became her way of regaining confidence and joy in life. Each time she finished a project, Kris felt like she was mending the broken pieces of her soul. Kris started attending gatherings with old friends, people she had forgotten, while spending so much time worrying about her children's and family's lives. These conversations with friends made her realize that she was not just a person who sacrificed, but someone who also had personal needs. Her friends shared stories about their lives, travels, joys, and sorrows. Kris was encouraged by their stories and felt that she was no longer isolated in a world revolving only around her children and family. One of the biggest changes Kris decided to make was to go to the beach alone. In the past, her beach trips had always been family affairs. Now, she decided to take time for herself to enjoy peace and relaxation. As she set foot on the sandy beach, Kris felt the vastness and freedom surrounding her. The gentle waves, the sea breeze blowing through her hair, made her feel reborn. The free days on the beach were an opportunity for Kris to rediscover the feeling of living for herself, not for anyone else. Kris no longer needed validation from her daughter or anyone else. In the past, she always felt the need to please others, from her children to those around her. But now, she understood that happiness was not about pleasing everyone, but about living true to herself. She no longer had to wait for compliments or judgments from others. Kris had learned to love herself, accept who she was, and live without worrying about meeting others' expectations. In the evenings, Kris spent time sitting alone in her room, looking at old photos and reflecting on the past. She remembered the days when she was just a mother, constantly worrying about her children and family, forgetting about herself. But now, Kris realized that to love others, that she needed to love herself first. These moments no longer made her feel lonely. Instead, she found peace in her heart. Not long after, Kris also began participating in meetings, sharing experiences with other women, especially those who had gone through significant changes in their lives like she had. Their stories helped Kris understand that it was never too late to start over. These women had found themselves after years of caring for their families, and Kris felt she was no longer alone in this journey. Eventually, Kris realized that the process of finding herself was not an easy path. Sometimes she felt tired, and sometimes she wanted to return to her old life. However, each time she remembered the lost years and understood that rediscovering herself was the most important thing. She was no longer the one behind, no longer a supporting role in anyone's life, but herself, a complete and whole Kris Jenner. Kris realized that she did not need validation from her children or others to feel valuable. She was valuable because of who she was, and that was something she had rediscovered. Every day, Kris continued to find small joys in life, from sewing clothes, walking on the beach, to chatting with friends. These actions helped her feel that life was not just about obligations and responsibilities, but also about moments for herself. Kris knew that she had mended herself, a strong, independent woman, no longer just the person behind someone else's success. She was herself, and that was the greatest thing she could create. Kris Jenner, a mother, a woman, now lived for herself, finding joy and freedom that she had long forgotten. She no longer had to please others. She just needed to do what made her happy. And that was the journey of rediscovering herself, a journey Kris had persistently walked, step by step, with the belief that she deserved love and respect.